the winter of 1962, the world stood on a razor's edge, poised between an uneasy peace and the terrifying abyss of annihilation. It was a time when the quiet hum of everyday life masked a deeper, more volatile heartbeat, one measured not in days or hours, but in secret conversations, coded messages, and the silent dance of nuclear shadows. Imagine standing in Washington, D.C. on a bitter November night. The cold seeps through your coat as you pass the darkened streets, unaware that miles away, under the restless sky over Cuba, missiles capable of ending life as it was known were quietly being assembled. The air carries the faint scent of burnt diesel and frozen earth, and somewhere far below, in dimly lit bunkers, men whisper the word Armageddon without daring to speak it aloud. This was not just a standoff between two nations. It was a cosmic tension stretched taut between human fear and the fragile hope for survival. The Cold War, so often described as a silent war, was, in truth, a seething powder keg of moments where history's fragile thread trembled perilously close to snapping. Yet behind the grand narratives of presidents and generals, treaties and summits, lie stories so small, so intimate, they feel almost like whispers trapped in glass. Stories of individual choices, missteps, and the eerie misfires of fate. One such story begins on a quiet October evening when an off-duty radar operator in a remote outpost in Alaska glimpsed what seemed like an impossible sight. A cluster of blips racing toward American skies. Panic flashed across the room as sirens wailed and messages rushed through corridors. For a brief, frozen heartbeat, the world seemed poised to tilt irreversibly toward fire and ruin. But as the hours ticked by, the blips vanished, mere false alarms born from a moonlit reflection or a software glitch. This moment, later dismissed, was one of many near misses buried beneath layers of classified files and the hush of official silence. We walk now with those who lived it, the analysts watching flickering screens, the commanders gripping their phones, the soldiers frozen in alert trenches. Their breath visible in the cold air, their eyes wide with uncertainty. They faced not just a foreign enemy, but the merciless uncertainty of technology and human error intertwined. And what of the messages exchanged between the two great powers, cryptic, coded, and sometimes dangerously misunderstood? A single misplaced word, a delayed transmission, a missed gesture of goodwill could have set loose forces no one fully controlled. The chessboard was global, the stakes unimaginable. Yet the game was played in shadows behind closed doors, through back channels, and occasionally on the brink of disaster. This fragile dance bore a strange echo of older conflicts, ancient in their own way, the eternal struggle of power balanced by fear, the silent wars waged not in open battlefields, but in the minds and wills of those who understood the apocalypse lurking just beyond the horizon. As the philosopher Heraclitus once said, "The hidden harmony is better than the obvious." And here, in these moments teetering between light and dark, between sanity and madness, that hidden harmony was all that stood between humanity and extinction. But this was only the first shadow of what history has yet to tell. Beneath the polished surfaces of diplomacy and the steel-cold gaze of generals, a hidden labyrinth of tension spiraled deeper than most could see. The days following those fleeting alarms were filled with a quiet that was anything but peaceful, a silence weighted with suspicion, where every gesture and every silence spoke volumes. Letters crossed oceans, spoken words were carefully chosen, and yet in the murk of miscommunication, shadows lengthened. One of the most haunting pieces of this puzzle lies buried in a telegram intercepted from Soviet commanders, its meaning unclear, its tone ambiguous. It spoke of readiness and unexpected movements but left no clear path forward. For decades, historians debated whether this was a veiled threat or simply a misunderstood signal from a nervous outpost. What is certain is that in the smoke-filled rooms of Washington and Moscow, it was enough to send ripples of dread through the highest echelons of power. In those fragile hours, technology, our supposed guardian, often became a traitor. Early warning radars, marvels of their time, were prone to glitches that could be fatal. A flock of migrating birds mistaken for incoming bombers. A weather balloon drifting too close to radar's gaze. Each anomaly had the power to unravel years of careful diplomacy in seconds. The question that haunted every watch officer was never if the alarms would sound, but whether humanity would be ready when they did. Yet, amid this fragile web of uncertainty, stories of extraordinary calm and courage emerge. A young analyst who refused to sound the alarm despite flashing warnings, trusting instead in reason over panic. A general who chose to wait, who held his finger from the trigger, aware that a single rash decision could ignite the world's final war. These moments are the quiet counterpoint to the thunderous threat of nuclear annihilation, human decisions made in the shadow of incomprehensible power. And as these tales weave together, another mystery begins to reveal itself, the role of the unknown, the unexpected. A seemingly trivial signal intercepted in a remote corner of Siberia, a pattern noticed in the frantic exchanges of radio operators, an obscure report buried in the archives of an intelligence agency, all fragments of a story larger than any one individual or nation. What if the Cold War was not just a standoff between two superpowers, but a silent war with fate itself? What if the narrowest escapes were not luck but something else, a force hovering just beyond understanding, a fragile balance that history only glimpses in fleeting moments? These questions echo beyond the Cold War into the depths of who we are as a species. How close do we always live to the edge? What unseen threads hold the fragile fabric of civilization together? And what shadows do we not yet know are waiting in the wings? The trail leads further into a darkness older than the empire itself. The weight of those moments lingers still, like a long-forgotten echo in an empty chamber, where the air seems charged with both relief and regret. The final threads of this story draw us to accounts so haunting that their quiet gravity demands our full attention. Stories told in whispers, hidden in declassified files, or passed down in the trembling voices of those who stood watch on the brink. One such account comes from the harrowing night of October 27, 1962, now etched in history as Black Saturday. On this day, a U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba, its pilot falling silently into the sea of uncertainty and fear. Simultaneously, a Soviet submarine commander, deep beneath the ocean's surface, faced a choice that could have ignited the apocalypse, with communication severed. And unaware if war had already begun above, he debated launching a nuclear torpedo. His fingers hovered over the trigger, a moment suspended in time. What stopped him? Perhaps a flicker of doubt, the weight of his own humanity, or a whisper of hope still unbroken. This fragile mercy, the choice to hold back, was repeated again and again in those tense days. Leaders on both sides grappled with the impossible calculus of survival, balancing pride, ideology, and the dread of total destruction. As we peer through the haze of history, it becomes clear that the Cold War was not merely a clash of weapons and politics, but a profound meditation on the limits of human reason and restraint. Yet, even as these stories unfold, there is no neat conclusion. No final verdict or comforting answer. Instead, we are left with something far more unsettling, the sense that history's greatest near catastrophes are often hidden in plain sight, woven into the fabric of ordinary days and the decisions of those who never wished to become heroes or villains. What if the truth of the Cold War's brinkmanship is a mirror, reflecting the fragility of peace not just then, but now? That the boundary between order and chaos remains perilously thin, always held by invisible hands and the silent prayers of those who dare to hope. Perhaps, as the philosopher once mused, the past is not behind us at all, but all around us, waiting for the right eyes to see, the right hearts to understand. The Cold War's shadow is cast long, a reminder that the greatest stories are not always those of grand victories, but those moments where humanity stands still, breath held, at the edge of the abyss. So, what truths has history yet to reveal? What stories linger in the silence between headlines and treaties? The conversation is open, an invitation to keep listening, to keep searching, to keep holding the delicate threads of memory and hope until the next story finds us. Keep listening for the footsteps of the past,